Good morning and welcome. August 2020, welcome to the native plant garden tour. The very front of the house when we first moved into this foreclosed property was a mess. There were so many weeds and junk plants that I had no idea what they were, and it's been a process of, with the help of strangers and friends, figuring out what was growing here and then putting in native things. This bed right here earlier this year was dying juniper, and just this year in the 90-degree weather I transplanted all these wonderful tough plants. And we have some beauties such as anise hyssop, wild geranium, meadow rue, golden alexander that blooms earlier in the year. And moving on, there's a lovely little walkway here created by the black cherry tree that went funk in the night about a month and a half to 2 months ago, and Joe cut this up into beautiful sections and it is now a lovely walkway. The ever so cool stepping stones that Beth, Kelsey, Joey, and Joe made for me. Love those, very nice. The bird bath actually does get birds in it. That's super fun. And welcome. Every spring there are a myriad of tulips that are blooming here. Variety of colors, shapes and sizes, all interwoven among these beautiful plants. Again, in the spring, the prairie smoke is a pink blossom of beauty. The ninebark right here was one of our first original plants. I fell in love with that at a nursery, not knowing that it was a native. And of course, one of my favorites is the pagoda dogwood. And that's one of the introductions to being able to be pleased with the front garden bed due to the help of some strangers, which have become friends. And this hydrangea was from them as well. So there's a variety of traditional plants, and I'm interweaving native plants. For example, this oh so cool guy, the butterfly weed. Those are some seed pods that the butterfly weed is growing. That is a native plant. To its left is Penstemon digitalis. More of them are right here. They attract hummingbirds earlier on. Those are super fun. Of course, the purple coneflowers are native plants. And in here, the black-eyed Susans. A lot of these plants are pretty new. The blazing star, I just plunked in this year. That cream wild indigo to the left and right of the blazing star, I'm working on growing here. Here's some more beautiful butterfly weed, and right next to the butterfly weed is side oats grama grass. And I think these are just so cool. Those lovely seeds hang off of the side and look absolutely beautiful. And this lovely, very strange, wild native plant has tiny little blossoms on the very end. Actually, I'm not seeing very many. It's mostly done blooming, that attract and feed hummingbirds as well as other plants. The rattlesnake master right here is a very interesting native plant. Normally he doesn't need staking, but he survived an avalanche. I'll show you where that is in just a minute, so I did stake him. We'll come into the yard in just a minute, but I'd like to invite you first to the very first garden that I started here on the property about 19 years ago. We'll see the other side in just a minute. That I started as a cottage garden. But I'd like to invite you to the swale. And if you look up the dictionary definition of a swale, you'll see what it is. But bottom line, it's the steep area alongside the water that comes from across the strait. And I was tired of having to weed whack it, or tired of having to look at all the yucky tall grasses that were just really getting out of control. And about 3 years ago, I started growing these native plants here. They have deep roots, so I don't need to worry once they get established about things collapsing. And this was recently collapsed earlier this year, and the township came and put in the rocks for us. So there's a wide variety of things. Some are done blooming for now. The golden Alexander there is done blooming. The Ohio spiderwort, that's a thing of beauty. It's really, really goofy looking leaves, but the blossoms are just spectacular. And moving in, we have a rose milkweed, that pink guy right in front, those beautiful yellow blossoms, some Joe Pye weed toward the back, and then dangling over the water we have obedient plant. Those are super fun. I planted a bunch of ferns over here, some of which are doing fine, some of which are not. But overall, I no longer have to weed whack this beautiful area because it has native plants that are blooming from the beginning of summer until late fall. Many of them haven't even bloomed yet. That's kind of fun. Let's go back and I'll welcome you into the yard now. Oh, by the way, the cottage garden was started as a traditional normal garden with the traditional types of American plants that you would find. And recently, when I started realizing that native plants have awesome root structures and actually feed native insects and butterflies and birds, then I thought, oh, okay, I'll start incorporating a few more native plants into my traditional garden. Feel free to sit, enjoy. And some of these ferns, usually there are more ferns here. Truthfully, I dug up 2 wheelbarrow loads of them to put them into a new garden in the back that I call June's Woods. And I'll show you that in just a minute. In the meantime, here's the cottage garden that I have happily let milkweeds come grow in. Actually, I've deliberately planted them in here because they attract butterflies, specifically the monarch butterflies. So let's move on over here. The entire pond, when we moved in, looked more like this, with just stuff and grass growing by the edge and tons of cattails growing by the edge. The entire pond, it got to the point a number of years ago you couldn't even see the water because the plants were so weedy. So I'm starting to invite native shrubs. This is a downy serviceberry that I planted a few years ago. He's taking his sweet time growing, that's fine. And this native bed right here, this whole bed was planted about 3 years ago. Actually, it was 3 years ago. I had help with the WPPC, the Wildlife Plant and Propagation Committee, had some mentors help me. They volunteered their time and expertise and helped me choose plants that would do well here. I have absolutely been loving this. Other than the hardest part of the whole thing was preparing the ground, trying to get it weed-free for these poor little guys. That's a whole story in itself. But after that first year of watering them in, it's been virtually no work. I'm loving it. So let me introduce you to a few of these beauties. As you come down toward the water, you'll see more obedient plant here. And just behind that are some rose milkweed. And behind that is blue vervain, and that one just volunteered here on its own. And these guys have yet to bloom. There's still going to be more color, but just look at how beautiful these guys are. And we've got the yellow and then the purple of the ironweed right next to each other. Beautiful, beautiful. I got lucky with that placement. That wasn't deliberate. And as you move on, I've got some grasses that really are getting too much shade. I should move these. They should be highlighting the path here. And as you go to the path, you'll see that red plant just to the right of the rose milkweed. That red plant is cardinal flower. It likes wet and it attracts hummingbirds. Yay, super fun. And the great blue lobelia here. And that white plant is native baby's breath. It's called flowering spurge. It's actually done flowering. Those are the little seed areas. So it looks like it's blooming for a long time. Super fun. And just to the left of that, you see more cardinal flower. I've got some indigo that's working on growing up. That'll be beautiful. Have some beautiful grasses here that again are being shaded. They need more sun, so I'll need to relocate those. More blue vervain, the tall spiky guys. They like to grow in wet conditions. And over here we've got some hidden butterfly weeds, some lupines, all sorts of things. If I had to choose just one plant to attract butterflies and pollinators, it would be this one, Joe Pie Weed. And this one, normally when I'm here, I'll see a bunch of different butterflies all coming around and wanting to get that beautiful nectar. So this was my original introduction into native plants. And it was strongly suggested that I only start one native plant bed because it's a lot of work. And it was a lot of work, let's be truthful. However, I wanted to start more than one, so come with me and I will show you over here the shady native bed garden that I started at the same time 3 years ago. Now this one looks like it's sleeping now, and it really is. It really shines in the spring. There are yellow celandine poppies that grow here. There are tons and tons of different ferns. There are trillium that I have found elsewhere in the yard and transplanted here. Let me introduce you to just a few of these. They're super fun. I'm really enjoying them immensely. Looking in here, this leaves of 3, that guy is Jack in the Pulpit. And he has a very cool looking stalk in the spring. If you look, you'll see this mass of green right there. That will turn brilliant red. That's his seeds. And we've got some liatris, some blazing star, and some ferns. We have some wild geranium. These are false Solomon seal, and you can tell they're false because the seeds are at the very end. And interwoven more wild geranium, more ferns, got a golden Alexander sleeping right now, and some super cool grasses. These right here are bottle brush grasses. If you think of the shape of a bottle brush, that's what these are. Very cool native plant. And just volunteered here this year is this Culver's root, this white tall guy. And I didn't plant him, he just appeared. He's fine with me. He's a native and he's doing fine. He's attracting pollinators. And down here we have some wild ginger. And moving over to the other side, oh, the May-apples. Oh my gosh, in the spring, those May-apples are just so cool. Love those. Love those. Oop. Some more of the Jack in the Pulpit seeds right there. That'll be bright red. I mean bright, really crimson. This very lacy looking plant is Meadow Rue, and she is just beautiful. This whole bed actually started with these sedges. These are Pennsylvania sedge. And the reason that I started this here was this whole area under not only this silver maple tree, but these silver maple trees was being shaded a lot as the trees grew. And the ground was turning bare. And bare soil just washes away by wind, by water. So it all started, I bought those Pennsylvania sedge at the local community college, McHenry County College, during a WPPC plant sale, and brought them here. And then had a terrible bike accident, breaking my ACL, MCL, and meniscus. And while I was on crutches, I was able to hire a son of a friend who has a native garden, and he was able to plant those Pennsylvania sedges for me. So there's a bunch interwoven. And this whole garden at the very beginning 3 years ago was just those sedges. And then I realized, oh, I have trillium and I have Jack in the Pulpit that someone on a garden walk had given me. Why don't I bring them over from the staging bed that I had started about a decade ago and add them to this garden? And it just blossomed from there. I took some flat stones, they're sort of obscured now, but made a little walkway. Going forward, you can walk on those little flat stones, maybe take a seat at that little tree stump there. And we've got bleeding heart to the right of that little tree stump. We have columbine right here, more wild geranium. So anyway, thanks for joining me over here. And now let me take you back to this year's project. Haha, there's not just one, of course. This is me. So I'm planning for the garden walk tomorrow, and I've placed chairs all around. We do have the COVID-19 thing going on, so we are going to all be wearing masks. Let's pause to ooh and ah over the beautiful birdhouse that Beth made me. And it is located by this lovely rock that was moved here. That's a bench. I sit there and just sit and look at the pond. This beautiful grass, kind of hard to see in the shade, is a native. Sorry fella, forgot your name. All right, so one of my projects this year, other than weeding the entire 3 acres of garlic mustard and sticky burr stuff, and oh my gosh, just recently I've been focusing on the garden beds again. So one of the projects was that front garden you saw where the juniper had been removed. Another project was this butterfly garden. And this butterfly garden was just, again, started this year. Many of those plants were grown by seed. Those were given to us free at a conference that I attended last year held by the WPPC. And just this morning, as I was walking by carrying some chairs over to the other side, I saw a hummingbird that had been drinking from these royal catchfly plants, the red plants on the right. So this doesn't look spectacular, but you know, it's its first year and I'm pleased. I'm pleased. Things are doing well. So follow along with me if you'd be so kind. We'll take a peek over here. And this whole area had been really super scruffy. Lots and lots of junk growing in here, weeds, shall we say. And this spring, I transplanted some Monarda, some bee balm, that red stuff right here, and transplanted some purple coneflower. And also transplanted these guys in front of the cedar, and the jewelweed. Now, jewelweed I absolutely love. We would take the kids on walks in the forest and every place. We did lots and lots outdoors with the kids. And these cool little blossoms have seed pods that, another name for these are called touch-me-nots. You barely touch the seed pod and it bursts. And I think there's some elsewhere that I'll show you in just a minute if you stick with me. There actually is a walkway here of more of these pieces of wood from the tree that went thunk in the night. Actually, there was another tree that went thunk too. This scruffy looking dude was actually a big black cherry, and it tipped in the rain that we had. So I'll have to fully remove that later. But these chairs I just moved over this morning so that people tomorrow morning can just sit and enjoy. And I love looking over there at that original native plant bed. Super fun. All right, so let's move on over here. I've also tried to start a little shady area, shady garden for shrubs, native trees and native shrubs. These are pagoda dogwoods, some little ones. And I had read that the service berries are super, super beneficial to have, so I planted a bunch of those as well. And I'm hoping that people will feel free to just sit and enjoy. All right, let's move on, shall we? Bring you to one other. Oh, we have a volunteer obedient plant. I was walking around just yesterday and noticed, woohoo, it volunteered. How fun. So let me know your thoughts. I do want some open areas around the pond, but I also would like to incorporate more native plants. What do you think? Which native plants would you like to see around here? Now let's move on. One of the things that really occupied my time this summer, well, there was a lot, obviously working on building my business, the yoga business, but in addition to that, I spent tons and tons of time out here working on, oh my gosh, among other things, that's true, planting 100 ostrich ferns. So these little guys here will actually get to be really big. Those will get to be 2, 3, 4 feet high. Actually, I have some over here I can show you that have been around for a few years. But the reason that I like ostrich ferns is not only are they beautiful in their ferns, ta-da, ostrich fern. Oh, here's a bad guy. A sticky burr plant, one of many. He escaped. So let me just grab him and we'll toss him into the bonfire pile on our way to what I wanted to show you. But anyway, that ostrich fern and the other ostrich ferns were planted because we live in a flood zone B. And that means when it rains, we get an overflow river that just, oh my gosh, takes over. It goes through the entire middle of the yard from the front to the back. And there's also many tributaries on that overflow river. And doing research, many of our areas of the flood zone B are in shade. And ostrich ferns are very nice in that they will help the soil hold down. Okay, so let me introduce you to June's Woods. I have so many native plant friends, or friends who grow native plants, and June is just a dear, sweet, wonderful lady. She was one of my mentors. I had 2 mentors helping me with that beautiful flower bed by the pond. And June, bless her heart, loves to share plants. My opinion started with my dad. A true gardener is a true gardener only if they share plants or produce or seeds or knowledge. They need to share something. Dad, you're inspirational. And starting with that, June was sharing a whole bunch of plants with me. So let me invite you into what I now call June's Woods. Those 2 wheelbarrow loads of ferns that I dug up from various spots in the yard, you really can't see them now. Again, this was done in 90-degree weather. It was 90 degrees for 2.5 weeks in a row. Kind of ridiculous. Hard conditions, but next year it'll be really nice. So the whole idea is this front, this whole entrance to the woods will have a whole bunch of ferns just greeting you, this whole bank of ferns. And one of those trees that went thunk in the night becomes the entrance. And as we come in, I like to sit here and look around. And what I decided is I was just going to get all these plants into the ground as quickly as I could. And they don't look like a whole lot now, but let me tell you a little bit more about them. My goal was just to get them in the ground so they'd live. But as I was doing that, I started to see and think, oh, I might like to have paths so that I can access what's in here, and wouldn't it be cool to have meditation paths in here? Now, I know where my paths are, but I'd like to invite people that aren't familiar with the plants, so I did edge these paths with these sticks. It's not perfectly edged, but it's more or less a figure 8 in here of places that you can just quietly stroll and listen. This is a sedge from June, maidenhair fern, many more ferns including June's favorite, which is meadow rue. I forgot what these cool guys are. I'm thinking it's some sort of Jacob's ladder something or other. I have to check. But we've got a whole bunch of beautiful things in here that are all natives, including this native gooseberry that June gave me. And I've got this gorgeous oak that had been growing here for a number of years. But in the process of clearing out the bad stuff and putting in the good stuff, I noticed 7 little baby oak trees that were already volunteering. So red twig dogwood, of course, is always welcome. Oh, nodding onion. I've gotten a few places. City of Chicago was named what it was named because it smelled bad. And these nodding onions were part of the reason. Oaks. That's one. Where's more? There's another one. Anyway, you get the idea. Oh, right. A redbud that volunteered from the redbud that I had grown from seed. Some friends of mine had a redbud, and I asked if I could take some seeds. And they said sure. And right by the pond where we just were is where that original redbud was. So I'm working on it. We've got goldenrod, native. Again, the ferns aren't doing too well with all that heat, but they will. So most of my summer was spent hauling water, as well as being in mosquito netting and just, trying to plant these guys. So, June's Woods. You can look up, you can look down. And thank you so much for joining me on a tour of the yard. Let me see if I can find a ripe touch-me-not jewelweed seed pod for you. Those are super fun. So walking in the neighborhoods at home, we would try and keep the kids engaged by having them look for sewers or other fun things to run and jump on. In the woods, I would look for the fun things that I can't find here right now, the touch-me-not seeds and the wild raspberries, things that my kids could just pick and eat or play with and have fun. Some of the other 100 ostrich ferns are here, along with a volunteer bellwort. And not all the ferns are doing that well, but we're working on it. In the meantime, those touch-me-nots are a wonderful place to hold the ground in place. And here are the raspberries, the original polka raspberries. Thank you, Dad. And that beautiful view you can enjoy by sitting on this bench that I made. Normally Joe's the talented one. Hey, it took a lot of talent to put 4 cinder blocks and a piece of wood on here. All right, so if you sit here, plunk, then you can just enjoy that beautiful view. And of course, it doesn't stop because behind me is another pagoda dogwood, more of the ferns that I planted, more jewelweed. I've been transplanting a lot of wild ginger